There was a man named Neil Postman who in 1984 claimed that the year that was passing more closely resembled Brave New World than the book 1984. And although I disagree with his point because he left out some very important things about what was happening, I was working in a medical library in 1984. It was impossible to miss the point about how closely identified that time, that year was with the book 1984, Love Is Hate, and so on. But if you leave out what was happening in 1984 in San Francisco, it does more closely resemble Brave New World. In a sense, something can become true when you leave out what makes it not true. And when you look at the parallels in the history of cinema between the end of the Civil War and the end of World War II, you see the same little group of people reasserting power for the defeated, for the antebellum South and the fascists in Birth of a Nation and the Red Scare. It was the same friendly group of people. D.W. Griffith knew Mussolini. And the idea of counterfeiting a reality by convincing people of something that was not true as though it was true is at the root of the structure of the super story behind Lenin's Houdini, and of course what Neil Postman leaves out. In the 1910s, there was a man named Hubert Harrison who was listed as the top 10, one of the top 10 sightseeing attractions in New York City in that era. And you can look at Donald Trump as something of a soapbox orator too. The difference, of course, is that Trump is making things true by leaving out the things that would lead them to be false. And if you understand that hocus pocus, the ledger domain, then you can see why it's an example for him to be Van Gogh and claimed he was not serving up an metaphor for the system of the group of moguls in Hollywood who long rivaled the American Civil Rights Movement. Now, The Night Watch by King Crimson and Looking for Mercy Street by Peter Gabriel have similar tempo and tonality. And they're both tributes. One is a tribute to a Dutch master painting, and the other is a tribute to an American poet. The tape that was given by the writer of Night Watch to the writer of Looking for Mercy Street, of course, was a link to what they had done with me. Gabriel's art, technically the term is phantasmagorical. It's technically the right term, but it might cause a little bit of confusion, be a little misleading, because it is pretty heavy on allegory. It's almost, his art is societally organized, like Stratego. It's a strategy. It's sort of the court of influential people, referred to in history books sometimes as the League of Gentlemen, or the Jekyll Island scene. Powerful people basically having fun. And the tape went by way of Roger Waters, Neil Cohen's attorney, and which screams Peter Sinfield. The problem with Sinfield is that he elevates the dirty and underhanded to a sort of idealism. what he does is he takes somebody who he cements and batters into the status of a follower, and then says, here is the exemplar to lead by example. And that's very disingenuous. Now, there was an element of the fountainhead to the early career of Robert Fripp, but I think the real lockdown on a person resembles the antithesis to the fountainhead, and it helps you understand why I can both love the fountainhead and Martin Luther King. You know, you present someone as an example and challenge them to be the exemplar. And I don't think you can do that because it's disingenuous. And it elevates Hollywood to a representative of the civil rights movement, of which they were in rivalry. That is part of the fabric of the story that they're telling, which is the story, the trick of the tail, the Lenin's Houdini, making something true by leaving out what makes it false. And to consider that the March of Progress is a mistake because it runs head on into police, state psychiatry, allegations of schizophrenia. And I mean, you can't exist as an artist in the philosophical element of Hollywood. And Hollywood, of course, has its own psychiatry. Like Anne Sexton, who wrote Mercy Street in 45, the book that the song was based on, performed in Pittsburgh, and Sam Hazo of the International Poetry Forum at the dinner reception didn't think she was going to make it. She was having such a meltdown. She was completely unhinged. But she performed beautifully. I mean, her performance certainly had value, but to represent what Yusu Endor did on that album is the John Rawls idea of the closest continuer of Martin Luther King, is a way of justifying what they did, pretending to find the script that they wrote and interpreting it. It's more than a little bit misleading. Now, phantasmagorical is the technical term for it, but it's sometimes used sort of as a comic book term rather than a societally organized progression of strategy. It's more like something you'd associate with Mickey Spillane or comic book Pulp Fiction, but to represent Martin Luther King in Pulp Fiction, to be used by his most hostile antagonists as though there was some kind of secret message validating him is pulp.